My name is Alina, and I used to believe that a house could protect you from anything. Ours stood at the end of a quiet street, a small white place with soft blue windows, somewhere between Europe and America where people mostly kept to themselves. It wasn't big, and it wasn't expensive. My mom once told me it cost about $65,000 years ago, but it held every memory I had. I grew up there with my mom, Clara. After my father left, it became just the two of us, and for a long time, that felt enough. Everything changed the day Daniel moved in. At first, he didn't seem like a problem. He spoke gently, wore neat clothes, and always acted respectful in front of my mom. He brought her flowers, sometimes even expensive ones that must have cost at least £40, and he would smile at me in a way that felt polite but distant. I tried to convince myself that maybe this was good for us. Maybe my mom deserved someone who stayed. But after the wedding, things shifted in a way I couldn't explain right away. It started small. Daniel began making comments about the house, how things should be arranged, how quiet it should be, how I should behave properly. I didn't argue. I thought maybe he was just adjusting. Then he started talking about me. One evening, I walked into the kitchen wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, nothing special, nothing different from what I had always worn. Daniel looked at me, then frowned. "You shouldn't dress like that around the house," he said. I froze. "Like what?" "It's distracting," he replied, like it was obvious. I didn't understand. I looked down at myself, confused. There was nothing unusual about what I was wearing. Still, I nodded and walked away, trying not to make it a big deal. But it didn't stop. Over the next few days, then weeks, he kept saying things like that. Every time I passed through the living room, every time I went to get water at night, every time I simply existed in my own space, he had something to say. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried weight. It made me feel like I was doing something wrong without knowing what it was. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling stayed. It was like being watched, even when no one was speaking. One night, I finally went to my mom. She was sitting at the table, going through some papers, probably bills or something about money. We weren't rich, and every dollar mattered. "Mom," I said quietly, "why does Daniel keep saying things about my clothes?" She didn't look up right away. When she finally did, her expression was tired. "He just has his way of thinking," she said. "Don't argue with him." That was it. No explanation, no defense. I nodded, but something inside me shifted. For the first time, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like I had to be careful in it, like every step I took could be judged. And even though nothing had happened yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. The tension in the house didn't explode all at once. It built slowly, like a storm you can feel before you see. Every day after that conversation with my mom, I became more aware of how I moved, how I dressed, even how I sat today. I started choosing looser clothes, longer sleeves, anything that wouldn't draw attention. But it didn't matter. Daniel always found something to complain about. "You walk around like you don't care who's watching," he said one afternoon as I passed through the living room. I stopped, confused. "I'm just going to the kitchen." "That's exactly the problem," he replied, shaking his head. I didn't argue. I had learned that arguing only made things worse. Instead, I kept my head down and stayed in my room as much as I could. That space became the only place where I felt even a little safe, though even there, the feeling of discomfort didn't fully go away. Weeks passed like that. My mom barely spoke about it. She acted like everything was normal, like this was just part of life now. Sometimes I would catch her looking at me, like she wanted to say something, but she never did. That silence started to hurt more than Daniel's words. It felt like I was slowly being pushed out of my own life, and she was letting it happen. The day everything broke started like any other. I went to school, came back in the late afternoon, and stepped into the house quietly. I remember thinking it felt unusually still, like the air itself was waiting. Daniel was sitting in the living room. He wasn't reading or watching anything. He was just sitting there, hands clasped, staring straight ahead. When he heard the door close, he turned toward me. "Alina," he said, his voice calm but cold. "We need to talk." My stomach tightened. I set my bag down slowly and stepped into the room. "About what?" "About this situation," he said. "It can't continue." I didn't know what he meant, but I could feel something serious coming. "What situation?" He stood up then, and the way he looked at me made me feel small. "The way you act, the way you dress, the way you move around this house." I felt my chest tighten. I'm not doing anything wrong. He shook his head, like I had just proven his point. That's exactly the issue. You don't even see it. I glanced at my mom. She was sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap, eyes lowered. She hadn't said a word. Mom, I said, my voice shaking slightly. She didn't respond. Daniel took a step closer. This house needs peace. It needs order. And right now, you are disturbing that. I live here, I said, louder now. This is my home too. No, he replied firmly. Not anymore. The words hit me like a shock. What? You need to leave, he said. For a moment, I thought I had heard him wrong. You can't be serious. I am, he said. I've tried to be patient, but this isn't working. It's better for everyone if you go. I turned to my mom again, desperate now. Mom, say something. You're just going to let him do this. She finally looked up at me, and for a second, I thought I saw regret in her eyes. But it disappeared quickly. Maybe it's for the best, she said quietly. Those words broke something inside me. For the best. I repeated, barely able to believe it. You want me to leave my own home? She didn't answer. She just looked away again. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. I realized then that there was no one on my side in that house. No one who was going to stand up for me. Fine, I said, my voice shaking but firm. If that's what you both want. I walked to my room, my hands trembling as I pulled out a small bag. I didn't take much, just some clothes, my phone, and the little bit of money I had saved, about $120. It didn't feel real. It felt like I was packing for a short trip, not leaving my home forever. As I zipped the bag, I looked around my room. The walls, the bed, the window where I used to sit and think, it all felt distant now, like it already belonged to someone else. When I stepped back into the living room, Daniel was still standing there. My mom didn't look at me. I'll go, I said quietly. No one stopped me. I walked to the front door, my heart pounding with every step. When I opened it, the cold air hit my face, sharp and real. For a moment, I hesitated. I hoped, just a little, that my mom would call out, that she would tell me to stay. But she didn't. So I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The sound of it shutting felt final. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the house. It looked the same as it always had. White walls, blue windows, quiet and still. But it didn't feel like home anymore. I adjusted the strap of my bag and started walking. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet, only that I couldn't stay. My friend Sophie lived in another city, a few hours away, and I hoped she would let me stay for a while. It wasn't a plan, but it was all I had. As I walked down the street, I didn't look back again. Because deep down, I knew that if I did, I might not have the strength to keep going. Living with Sophie felt strange at first, like I had stepped into someone else's life by accident. Her apartment was small, tucked above a quiet street in another city that sat between Europe and America, far enough from my old home that everything there felt distant. She lived with her older brother, Lucas, who worked long hours but still made space for me without asking too many questions. You can stay as long as you need, Sophie had said the first night, handing me a blanket and a soft smile. I didn't know how to respond to that kind of kindness. I had arrived with just one bag and about $120 in my pocket, feeling like I had been erased from my own life. But in that apartment, even though it wasn't mine, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: relief. Days turned into a routine. I helped Sophie with small things, cleaned when I could, and started looking for part-time work. I found a small job at a cafe nearby, earning about $9 an hour. It wasn't much, but it gave me something to hold on to, a sense that I wasn't completely lost. Still, the past followed me. At night, when everything was quiet, my mind would go back to that house. I kept replaying moments. Daniel's words, my mom's silence, the way everything had changed so quickly. I tried to make sense of it, but nothing fit together. It all felt wrong in a way I couldn't fully explain. Then one morning, everything shifted again. I was sitting at the small kitchen table, sipping tea, when Lucas walked in holding his phone. His expression was serious, more serious than I had ever seen it before. "Alina," he said, hesitating slightly, "there's something you need to see." My stomach tightened instantly. "What is it?" He sat across from me and turned the phone toward me. "It's about Daniel." My heart started racing. I hadn't heard anything about him since I left.
I wasn't sure if I even wanted to.
What happened?
I asked quietly.
He's been arrested. The words hit me hard, but I didn't understand yet. For what?
Lucas paused, like he was choosing his words carefully.
The police searched the house.
My hands started to shake slightly. Why would they do that?
They had a report, he said. And when they went inside, they found hidden cameras.
For a moment, I couldn't process what he was saying.
Hidden cameras.
He nodded slowly.
In different parts of the house.
A cold feeling spread through me.
Where? Lucas looked at me, his expression heavy. Including your room. Everything inside me went still. My room? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper.
He nodded again. I felt like the air had been pulled out of the room.
Suddenly, all those moments, the strange comments, the constant watching, the way Daniel always seemed aware of where I was, started to connect in a way that made my skin crawl. That's not possible, I said, even though part of me already knew it was. They found recordings, Lucas continued gently. A lot of them. I pushed my chair back slightly, my hands gripping the edge of the table. My thoughts were racing, but they felt scattered, like I couldn't hold onto any of them long enough to understand. Why would he do that? I asked, though the question felt pointless. Lucas didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. The police believe it wasn't just random. They think he had been doing it for a while. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to steady myself. The house that once felt safe now felt like something else entirely, something I had never truly understood while I was inside it. But then Lucas said something that made everything even worse. There's more, he added carefully. I opened my eyes. What? They're looking into whether your mom knew about it. The words didn't make sense at first. No, she wouldn't. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. I remembered every time I had gone to her. Every question I had asked. Every moment she chose to stay silent instead of protecting me. They found messages, Lucas said. Between them, the police think she may have been aware of his behavior. I felt like I was falling, even though I was still sitting in that chair. No, I whispered. She's my mom. But the truth was starting to form, piece by piece, whether I wanted it to or not. Her silence, her avoidance, the way she never defended me. It all meant something. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. I need some air. Sophie, who had been standing quietly near the door, stepped forward. I'll come with you. I shook my head. I need a minute. I stepped outside into the cool air, my heart pounding. The street was quiet, just like the one I had left behind, but everything felt different now. I wasn't just someone who had been pushed out of her home. I was someone who had escaped something much worse than I had ever realized. And as painful as that truth was, it also gave me something unexpected, a strange, quiet strength. Because for the first time, I understood that leaving that house hadn't been a loss. It had been the beginning of getting my life back. After that day, nothing felt the same, but for once, that wasn't a bad thing. The truth had been heavy, almost too much to carry at first. 4 days. I moved through life in a quiet haze, going to work at the cafe, coming back to Sophie's apartment, barely speaking unless someone spoke to me first. My mind kept circling the same thoughts, the same memories, but now they had a different meaning. Things I didn't understand before suddenly made sense, and that understanding hurt. But slowly, something else started to grow underneath all of that pain. Clarity. I began to see my past differently, not as something I should go back to, but as something I had survived. Sophie and Lucas never pushed me to talk, but they were always there. Sometimes Sophie would sit next to me on the couch and just scroll through her phone, letting the silence feel normal instead of empty. Lucas would bring home extra food, joking that he accidentally spent too much money, even though we all knew he was doing it on purpose. You don't have to figure everything out at once, Sophie told me one evening. I nodded, even though part of me still felt like I had to. A few weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I stared at my phone for a long time before answering. Hello? Alina, the voice said. It was calm, official. This is Officer Martin. I'm calling about the investigation involving Daniel. My chest tightened. Okay. We wanted to inform you that the case is moving forward. There's strong evidence, and he is likely to face several years in prison, along with financial penalties that could exceed £50,000. I didn't feel relief exactly. It was something quieter than that.
Something steady.
There's also an ongoing inquiry regarding your mother, he added. If you're willing, we may need your statement.
I swallowed. This was the part one had been avoiding.
I'll think about it, I said.
That's completely fine, he replied.
Take your time. After the call ended, I sat there for a long moment, staring at nothing, saying something official, putting everything into words. It felt final in a way I wasn't sure I was ready for.
But I also knew that staying silent hadn't protected me before, and I didn't want to live like that anymore.
A few days later, I agreed to speak with them.
It wasn't easy.
I told them everything I could remember, Daniel's behavior, the comments, the way my mom had reacted. Some parts were hard to say out loud, but once I started, I didn't stop. It felt like releasing something I had been holding inside for too long. When it was over, I felt exhausted, but also lighter. Life didn't magically become perfect after that, but it started to feel like mine again. I worked more hours at the cafe, saving what I could. By the end of 2 months, I had managed to put aside nearly $900.
It wasn't a lot, but it was a beginning.
One afternoon, while walking home from work, I noticed a small house with a sign in front of it.
For sale.
I almost walked past it, but something made me stop. It was simple, white walls, blue windows, a small front step. Not exactly like my old house, but close enough that it made my chest tighten for a different reason this time.
I stepped closer, reading the details. The price was around $80,000.
Way more than I had, but not impossible someday. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to imagine something.
A space that was mine.
A place where I didn't have to feel watched, judged, or pushed aside.
A home built on my own choices.
You like it? I turned to see Sophie standing a few steps behind me, smiling slightly. Yeah, I admitted. I do. Then maybe it's something to work toward, she said. I looked back at the house. For once, the idea of the future didn't scare me. It felt open. That night, I sat by the window in the apartment, looking out at the quiet street below. I thought about everything that had happened, the house I lost, the truth I discovered, the people who stood by me when I had nothing.
I also thought about my mom. I still didn't have answers for everything.
I didn't know if I would ever speak to her again, or if I even wanted to. That pain hadn't disappeared, but it didn't control me anymore.
I realized something then. Leaving that house wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment I finally stepped into my own.
I didn't know exactly where I would be in a year, or 5 years, or how long it would take to build the life I wanted. But for the first time, I trusted myself to get there.
And that was enough.
Because this time, no one else would decide where I belonged. This time, I would build a life that no one could take away from me. And this time, I would finally be home.